morning, everyone. My name is Renee.
I'm Miguel.
And I'm EVA, and we're your hosts. Welcome to Signals in the Noise, daily insights into trends across the narrative landscape.
What do we mean by narrative landscape? Conversations unfold around us, reinforcing ideas, beliefs, and values that we interact with every day. We know that narrative is not static. Stories and messages can both trickle up and trickle down from local to national, from politicians to celebrities, and from influencers and micro influencers who spread information in both centralized and decentralized ways.
And then our top-notch team combs through news articles, social media content, and websites, and we dissect content to identify conversations, messages, and stories. This allows us to identify the shape and color of how meaning is made in the landscape in which we're all organizing and communicating in. This is what we like to call monitoring the narrative weather.
I like being called top notch. Think of it as your resident meteorologist tracking the narrative weather across the country. Each morning, we'll walk you through the latest, where we cover stories of importance. Then we'll move to hot takes, where we look at viral content, and we'll wrap things up with On the Radar, a segment where we talk about real-time stories that we're tracking. With all that out the way, let's get right into our first segment, the latest.
As we mentioned in yesterday's episode of Signals in the Noise, we're tracking conversations related to election and voter protection and efforts to undermine the election. While we clocked the right's effort to hijack count the vote messaging and hashtags, in the last 24 hours, we've noted them spreading their messages of discord and confusion onto other hashtags.
And all of these hashtags and phrases used by the right are part of the anti-democratic rigged election narrative, which started from the president himself. Hashtag stop the steal and the phrases stop the count and stop the steal saw an uptick in conversational volume from Tuesday to Wednesday, while newer hashtags, mail fraud, count every legal vote, and dead voters are all dog whistles for the false claim that undocumented folks are voting in droves, or others are using voter rolls of deceased people to cast extra votes for the Democrats.
And these hashtags appear to be so large in volume because influencers like Don Jr., Blexit founder Candace Owens, and washed up actor / full-time conspiracy theorist James Woods, and MAGA bro known on Twitter as Fleckus, has been peddling false claims of widespread voter fraud within this conversation. We know all of them have large followings, so it's important to note that just because we see these hashtags at such a high volume doesn't mean that this is the dominant narrative being uplifted by the media or in conversations across social media. Although these hashtags and messages within this conversation are lower in volume than progressive hashtags and messages on voter protection, the messages and underlying beliefs within these conversations really can't be ignored.
Very true. The main public group on Facebook mobilizing Trump's base is Stop the Steal. With mainstream media picking up the story, Facebook has already deleted the group. However, at its highest membership, it had 323,000 members. Y'all, all of this started just early this week, okay? I know. We know there's a new group currently making the rounds right now, which is called Stop the Spread, which has a few thousand members already. Stop the Spread focuses their efforts, as they call them, efforts, I say that very, very loosely, in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan.
So most of the states that have been too close to call? It's a funny coincidence.
Yeah, coincidence, purposeful. Are they the same word? We don't know. Maybe if Trump hadn't attacked vote by mail in the summertime, there'd be more provisional ballots in it for him too. Just saying.
Oh, you're right. And his advisors told him not to attack vote by mail because of concerns that something like this would happen. But he's gonna do what he want to do.
Maybe
I'm not great at math, but to me, the current numbers, I don't really know if it's helping him to continue down the road.
Oh, Lord. Okay, so we know that the right's narratives around election fraud reinforce false ideas about how big of an issue voter fraud is, because there's literally no solid proof of widespread voter fraud. Like, it doesn't exist anywhere. Please produce the facts, produce the evidence, give us the receipts, okay? We need the receipts.
I think there's more proof for the Loch Ness Monster than this.
Not surprisingly, there's also a conspiratorial fringe in these efforts. Wednesday night's rally in Maricopa, Arizona was led by known chaos agent and Pizzagate pusher Mike Cernovich. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the same person that rallied behind Sharpiegate that same night. The conspiracy theorists are not going away. it seems.
Look, I hate to say it, but conspiracy theories would sooner get their own congressional caucus under the Republican Party than disappear forever.
Ooh, the caucus of Super Q. I love this transformation.
I would not like to see
it. Don't give them ideas, EVA. While Facebook has lagged behind on their platform accountability practices, they have shut down an anti-lockdown group with over 79,000 members who mobilized to protest at vote counting locations in Detroit on Wednesday.
Sounds a lot like astroturfing.
Is it? Because you're definitely right about that, Renee. Now, real quick, definition break. The word astroturfing, I try. The word astroturfing refers to the disguising of an orchestrated campaign as a grassroots event or a spontaneous event that is used to sway public opinion.
I feel like we should develop a jingle for your definition break, CBA.
Oh, that'd be good. Breaks with EVA.
Also, Mother Jones has reported that the Stop the Count Facebook group and related events are backed by GOP consultants and Women for America First, a Tea Party organization. This is super similar to the astroturfing campaign launched by another right-wing operative group behind the surge of reopen protests back in April. Is anybody shocked? No?
Not me.
No, definitely not.
We did say this week would be ripe for misinformation and disinformation, and we're seeing the spread of it in real time.
And in case the distinction between the two isn't clear, I'm going to take a quick page from EVA's book and break down some of the definitions. So misinformation is information that's false, but not created or distributed with the intention of causing harm. Disinformation describes information that's false and deliberately created to harm a person, social group, organization, or a country, just so we're clear.
Did a really great job of that.
Appreciate you. I tried.
Despite the sense of impending doom, scrolling through social media late at night, the dominant threads and left and progressive conversations on Twitter and Instagram do not fall into the trap of tackling right-wing narratives. Hashtag Joy to the Polls, Count Every Vote, and Every Vote Counts has trended up since last Wednesday and have broken through to mainstream media, as reported by news outlets in Oregon, Arizona, Nevada, Massachusetts, the Bay Area, and upstate New York, to name a few regions. Popular content within conversations on election protection are happening on Twitter and feature grassroots organizations like Billy We Rise and the New Georgia Project, as well as Representative Eric Swalwell of California, comedian D.L. Hughley, and a one Miss Robin Fenty herself, Rihanna.
Rihanna, if you are watching this, please send me some Savage Fenty. Please, thank you. On Instagram, hashtag Count Every Vote has over 23,000 posts, and hashtag Every Vote Counts has 156,000 posts. Some popular content in these hashtags are by actress America Ferrera and her organization Harness, artist She Got the Pink, mom blogger Jacqueline Hernandez Lewis, and actress Kerry Washington, all who spoke about the call to count every vote. Not all of them. Kerry Washington spoke about the call to count every vote on an episode of Jimmy Kimmel on Wednesday night. As we mentioned earlier, progressive conversations exceed those being seeded by the right. The top two phrases in the rights conversation are at 791,000 mentions on Twitter, and the top two phrases from progressives are at almost 2 million mentions on Twitter. Let's keep that same energy going. Let's keep it up.
It's not a competition, but if it was. But content and messages uplifted by influencers, affinity groups, and grassroots organizers found in these hashtags show just how effective it is to tackle disinformation that apparent attempts the ultra-right wing is trying to make to undermine the election and the voice of millions of voters who have casted their ballot. These conversations has also demonstrated the overwhelming support of poll workers as key players in ensuring we actually have a democratic process. With the essential workers emerging as an idea during the pandemic, it opens up the space to have some conversations in regards to poll workers and election officials as essential workers on our democracy. We should all embrace this as an opportunity to uplift policies that benefit essential workers of all kinds, especially around a living wage and access to comprehensive health insurance.
Yes, and even in the face of threats in some places, actual armed militias are showing up, goodness. And folks engaging in direct action to counter the right's attempts to steal the election underlines the belief that anything is possible when we take care of each other, hold firm to our values, and remind Trump and his enablers that voters choose our leaders, not the other way around. Regardless of the amount of corruption, lies, confusion, or threats of violence, the power of the people is an unstoppable force, period. Let's move on to our next segment, Hot Takes.
All right, y'all, with the possibility of a Biden presidency, we think it's important to get an understanding of how exactly we got to this moment.
Yeah, for sure. For as much campaigning and political strategy that both candidates' teams may have had, it would be a huge oversight to ignore the landscape that got us here.
You mean it wasn't just two white men's drive and perseverance that got us here, Renee?
White men are responsible for a lot of things, EVA. You know this. But we can't give Biden or Trump full credit here. It was folks on the ground who helped shape some of the battleground states that are top talking points of political commentators.
Mm-hmm.
But let's get even more specific. It was to the thanks of organizing of people of color and honestly the leadership of Black women that made a lot of this work possible. Cash App Black women today.
Yes, do that. You know, I can drop my Cash App in the chat if anybody needs to. We don't even have to go back that far in time to see the impact that on-the-ground organizing has had in the political landscape. 2013 marked a pivotal moment with the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement, which elevated the issue of police brutality against Black people back to the mainstream. Shout outs to y'all.
Shout out to y'all. And here we see how the leadership of Black women clearly sparked a national reawakening for many that still carries through to this day. Shout out to Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi. For real. Shout out to y'all.
Agreed. Now let's look at my home state of Georgia, y'all.
Ooh, the wing capital of the country, the creator of trap music, finger snapping music. Thank you, Lil Jon. And most importantly, Magic City, y'all. Most importantly. But because I love Georgia, I will not talk about the sports team. That's awful.
You know what? We're not going to go there this morning, okay? The state has had a history of being a Republican stronghold for the past 20 decades. Not 20 years, y'all, 20 decades. But with population growth, changing demographics, and grassroots-led efforts, it has become one of the stars of the 2020 election season. Just look at what happened early this morning. With around 20% or 90% of the vote, counted, it looks like Biden is leading by about 1,000 votes. Talk about a swing state, y'all.
Yeah.
Does this have anything to do with the wine moms that we talked about yesterday?
Maybe, but not just them, you know. No. Aside from suburban women who felt alienated by Trump, we also saw a lot of young people and people of color catch the social justice bug. I mean, look at Stacey Abrams' gubernatorial bid. I met her. She's a great lady. I love her.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I mean, I haven't met her, but I agree about the gubernatorial bid. I definitely remember seeing people come out in full force for her campaign. It's really that voter suppression efforts from opponents stopped us from having the country's first African-American governor, though.
Yeah, I mean, Abrams and her allies knew those hurdles before she ran her historic race. I mean, come on, she's a Black woman running in the South in a long-held Republican state. But Abrams is like so many before her. Can we talk about Maxine Waters, Shirley Chisholm, Ally Baker? Okay.
Yes.
Talk about it.
Right. They saw a vision and moved towards it and bringing people with them. Abrams' race inspired not just Georgians, but the nation and opened up the country's imagination that a Black woman in a high political office was not only possible, but would be good for all of us, not just some of us. Okay. That's no small feat. In fact, her race opened up the narrative space for Kamala Harris to be on the ticket. It's because of people organizing and leaders like her that organizations like Fair Fight and other grassroots GOTV efforts were able to get out the vote the way they did. The way that they did in the 2020 election. I got so excited. I can't even read it. Just look at those margins closing in on Biden in Georgia. There's no accident, y'all. And let's be real, Biden didn't make much of a show in Georgia until nearly election day.
Facts. So once again, we have Black women to thank for saving us. No surprise here. We really don't thank Black women enough. Like, I really don't think we do. This is why it's important to claim and uplift stories like this every single chance that we get. We owe it to ourselves, and we definitely owe it to future generations. The longstanding and often thankless work of organizing by our communities for our communities is what makes this political transformations possible. No matter who's in the White House, we will continue to see and build powerful movements for justice, liberation, and freedom. I feel like a preacher. I'm preaching.
Y'all, we really do stand on the shoulders of giants.
We do.
Yes, we do. Georgia's just one example, though. Remember, white supremacy is not relegated to southern states only. We saw fights against voter suppression pop up all over the country in the lead up to November 3rd. From returning citizens in Florida to ensuring mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania, even strict voting ID requirements in Wisconsin. Trump and the GOP were on a mission to make sure people didn't vote, but every single time people on the ground organized and fought back, and they fought back hard. By claiming these victories by grassroots groups and people of color, we stake our claim in the political landscape. remember, it's because of us that we're even talking about some of these battleground states to begin with.
Yeah. Okay, Miguel. So give us some tea. I know it's because of us that Biden has a fighting chance, but what happens if he wins? Tell us what's up, please.
You know I love me some tea in the morning. Well, a Biden presidency has to deal with the reality of Trump's America. At least that's what the media is trying to lead with. Like we mentioned in yesterday's episode, with Trump's 2020 numbers coming in at over 69 million votes and still counting, a good chunk of the country is still motivated by his message, actions, and worldview. One of the big stories moving is about how Latinx men voted for Trump. The reality, though, is my people showed out en masse for Biden. Let's just look at the numbers and not take the bait here, people. Instead, let's look at message let's look at messages such as the one put so well by Sandra Diaz of UCLA's Latino Policy and Politics Initiative, who says, quote, "Don't blame Latinos, don't blame black voters, don't blame women of color. American democracy and economic recovery is only possible with us."
Oof, ain't that the truth? And those of us who truly believe it, we have to keep spreading that good word like progressive evangelicals we are to anyone who will listen, okay? We have to combat the stories propped up by Trump and his followers that they have been pushing since day one. We will have to be honest about the political and cultural climate we're in and the narrative landscape. Yeah. We can't cede ground to the notion that we somehow stole the election or stole the White House and that this isn't our America. Yes, millions of voters sided with white supremacy this election, but millions also sided with the call to abandon a racist president and to embrace a future our movements are stewarding forth every single day. It's our work to keep making sure that people know it's absolutely possible for us to have a living wage, a flourishing multiracial democracy, and a type of governance that supports our lives instead of policing it. Remember, y'all, it was our people that built the path that got us here, and it'll be our people that get us through it. Now, I feel like I'm preaching.
Oregon, we need the Oregon right now, okay?
Let's move on to our last segment, y'all, on the radar. We're beginning to track hashtags democracy wins, voters decided, and democracy rising in preparation for this week's Voters Decide Day of Action and celebrations across the country.
We're also tracking left and progressive conversations and stories about Indigenous and AAPI voters, their role in the elections, and obstacles to voting, especially for voters in the strongholds of tribal nations in Nevada and Arizona who have been affected disproportionately by the pandemic and are routinely disenfranchised.
And to Miguel's point, this tied to small but important conversations about the role of organizers of color in Atlanta, Phoenix, Philly, Las Vegas, Minneapolis, I always struggle saying that, and Detroit, and how they helped secure a win for Biden despite being routinely shunned by the Democratic Party. Whether they want to admit it or not, Democrats depend on their strategy and grassroots efforts to win elections.
And we're also tracking any conversation or stories that talk about an ideological shift in the Democratic Party and the role the progressive wing of the party will play in the years to come, especially as they contend with a Senate runoff race in Georgia.
Yeah, we're definitely keeping track also on the other big news that's happening right now, the elections, and just kind of want to know what's going to be happening with Pennsylvania, where I'm at right now.
Yep. I got to get back to doom scrolling, y'all.
Some folks are starting to call it for Biden, but we're going to continue to keep an eye out for it. We're waiting for AP News and some other folks to figure out what's going on before we make a call on that.
It is not over until it's over, y'all.
It is not over till it's over, and I'm hoping it's over soon.
Yeah. So more on this and other real-time updates are in tomorrow's episode of not tomorrow. Tomorrow Saturday, right?
Next week's episode.
Monday's episode. I'm so excited. I want to talk to everybody still. Definitely make sure to catch Monday's episode of Signals in the Noise. Have a great rest of your day and have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Bye, y'all. Have a great weekend.